Average Joe had been looking forward to a relaxing weekend with his family, but when his new neighbors, the Smithsons, invited them to a backyard barbecue, he couldn't refuse. As they arrived at the Smithsons' house, they were greeted by the smell of smoke and sizzling meat. The Smithsons welcomed them with open arms and ushered them towards the backyard. Average Joe couldn't help but notice the strange look in their eyes. They seemed to be hiding something, but he couldn't quite put his finger on it. The backyard was beautifully decorated with colorful streamers and balloons. The grill was smoking, and the smell of meat filled the air. The Smithsons had spared no expense to make their guests feel at home. As they mingled with the other guests, Average Joe noticed something strange about the food. It tasted different than any barbecue he had ever had. The meat was tough and chewy, and the sauces had a strange bitter aftertaste. He mentioned it to his wife, but she didn't seem to notice anything amiss. The other guests also seemed to be enjoying the food, but the more Average Joe ate, the more he felt like something was off. It wasn't just the food that was strange. The guests seemed to be acting oddly too. They were too friendly, too accommodating, almost as if they were trying too hard to be nice. Average Joe decided to explore the backyard to get a better sense of the surroundings. He walked past the grill and noticed that the meat was different than what he had seen before. It looked like it was made from some kind of meat substitute. He turned around and saw the Smithsons watching him from the corner of their eyes. They quickly averted their gaze when he looked their way. Average Joe felt a shiver run down his spine. Something wasn't right, and he knew it. He decided to approach Corbin, one of the guests, and ask him if he had noticed anything strange. Corbin looked at him with a blank expression and simply replied, "Everything is fine. Enjoy the party." Average Joe couldn't shake off the feeling of unease. He looked around and noticed that Tong, another guest, was nowhere to be seen. He asked the Smithsons where Tong was, but they simply smiled and told him not to worry. Average Joe started to feel like he was in a horror movie. The cheerful atmosphere had turned into a nightmare, and he didn't know how to escape. He decided to take his family and leave the party as soon as possible. As they were leaving, the Smithsons tried to convince them to stay a little longer. Average Joe felt a chill run down his spine as he looked at them. He knew that there was something sinister going on, and he didn't want to be a part of it. As they drove away, Average Joe couldn't help but wonder what had just happened. What kind of barbecue was that, and what was in the food? He couldn't shake off the feeling that they had narrowly escaped something terrible. The Smithsons were definitely not what they seemed, and he knew that he had to find out what was really going on. The strange barbecue party had left Average Joe and his family feeling uneasy. He knew that something wasn't right, and he couldn't shake off the feeling of dread that had settled in his stomach. He decided to do some research on the Smithsons and their mysterious barbecue. He started by Googling their names, but he couldn't find anything suspicious. They seemed like an ordinary family, with no criminal record or shady history. However, he did find a news article about a recent increase in disappearances in the area. The article mentioned that several people had gone missing in the past few months, and the police had no leads on the cases. Average Joe's heart sank as he read the article. He couldn't help but wonder if there was a connection between the disappearances and the Smithsons' barbecue party. He decided to investigate further and drove back to the Smithsons' house. As he parked his car on the street, he noticed that the house looked different. The decorations were gone, and the house looked deserted. He cautiously approached the front door and knocked. There was no answer. He tried the door, and to his surprise, it was unlocked. He cautiously stepped inside, not knowing what to expect. The house was empty, and there was no sign of the Smithsons or any of the guests. He walked through the house, checking each room carefully. It was as if the Smithsons had disappeared into thin air. As he was about to leave, he noticed a door that led to the basement. He felt a knot form in his stomach as he slowly made his way down the stairs. The basement was dark and he couldn't see anything. He fumbled for the light switch and turned it on. What he saw made his blood run cold. The basement was filled with cages, and each cage held a person. The people were emaciated and looked terrified. They were huddled together, trying to stay warm. Average Joe couldn't believe what he was seeing. The Smithsons were kidnappers, and they had been using their barbecue party as a cover-up for their sinister activities. He knew that he had to do something to help the people in the cages. He called the police, and within minutes, they arrived at the scene. The Smithsons were arrested and the people in the cages were rescued. Average Joe's actions had saved several lives, and he was hailed as a hero. As he drove back home, he couldn't help but think about the horror that he had witnessed. He had never imagined that something like this could happen in his neighborhood. He knew that he would never forget the Smithsons and their barbecue party, and he would always be grateful that he had followed his instincts and investigated further. From that day on, Average Joe vowed to always trust his gut and never take anything at face value. He had learned a valuable lesson, and he knew that it was one that he would carry with him for the rest of his life. The aftermath of the Smithsons' barbecue party had left Average Joe and his family in a state of shock. They couldn't believe that their new neighbors had been kidnappers, and they were grateful that they had escaped unharmed. Despite the trauma of the experience, Average Joe couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction that he had been able to help the victims. He had always wanted to make a difference in the world, and this had been an opportunity for him to do just that. However, the incident had also left him feeling paranoid. He couldn't trust anyone anymore, and he found himself looking at his neighbors with suspicion. He couldn't help but wonder if there were other sinister secrets lurking behind closed doors. One day, while he was out for a walk, he ran into his neighbor, Corbin. Corbin was a friendly guy, and he had always been welcoming to Average Joe and his family. However, after the Smithsons' barbecue party, Average Joe couldn't help but feel wary of him. "Hey, Joe!" Corbin greeted him with a smile. "How are you doing?" "I'm doing okay," Average Joe replied, trying to keep his voice steady. "I heard about what happened at the Smithsons' party," Corbin said. "That's crazy, man. I had no idea they were capable of something like that." "Yeah," Average Joe said, feeling uneasy. "It's been a rough couple of weeks." "I can imagine," Corbin said sympathetically. "But don't worry, man. We're not all like that. You can trust me." Average Joe couldn't help but feel suspicious of Corbin's words. He knew that he couldn't trust anyone, no matter how friendly they seemed. However, he didn't want to offend Corbin, so he simply nodded and continued on his walk. As the days passed, Average Joe found himself becoming more and more paranoid. He couldn't help but feel like someone was watching him, and he had trouble sleeping at night. He knew that he needed to do something to calm his nerves. He decided to talk to McCormick, another neighbor who had always seemed level-headed and rational. He hoped that McCormick could offer him some insight into how to cope with the trauma of the Smithsons' party. "Hey, McCormick," Average Joe said as he approached him one day. "Can I talk to you for a minute?" "Sure. What's up?" McCormick replied, looking concerned. "I've been having a lot of trouble sleeping lately," Average Joe admitted. "Ever since the Smithsons' party, I've been feeling paranoid and anxious. I can't shake off the feeling that something bad is going to happen." McCormick nodded sympathetically. "I know how you feel," he said. "I was there too, remember?" "Yeah, I know," Average Joe said. "But you seem to be handling it better than I am. How do you do it?" McCormick took a deep breath. "Honestly, it's not easy," he said. "But I try to focus on the things that I can control. I try to stay informed, but I don't let the fear consume me. I know that there are bad people in the world, but I also know that there are good people too. We just have to be vigilant and stay alert." Average Joe felt a sense of relief wash over him. McCormick's words made sense, and he felt like he could apply them to his own life. He knew that he couldn't control everything, but he could control his own actions and reactions. "Thanks, McCormick," Average Joe said, feeling grateful for the conversation. "I feel better already." Days turned into weeks, and weeks turned into months. Average Joe gradually started to feel more like his old self. He still had moments of paranoia, but they were less frequent, and he felt like he was starting to regain control over his life. One day, as he was coming back from the grocery store, he noticed that his neighbor's house was up for sale. He wasn't surprised, considering what had happened with the Smithsons, but he couldn't help but feel a sense of sadness. Corbin had been a good neighbor, and it was a shame to see him go. As he was putting away his groceries, he heard a knock on his door. When he opened it, he was surprised to see Corbin standing there. "Hey, Joe," Corbin said, looking nervous. "Can we talk?" "Sure, come on in," Average Joe said, leading Corbin to the living room. "I know that things have been weird between us lately," Corbin said, looking down at his feet. "But I wanted to explain myself." Average Joe listened patiently as Corbin told him his side of the story. As it turned out, Corbin had been working with the police to investigate the Smithsons. He had suspected that something was off about them, and he had been gathering evidence for months. When he heard about the barbecue party, he knew that it was the perfect opportunity to catch them in the act. "I'm sorry that I couldn't tell you earlier," Corbin said, "but I couldn't risk blowing my cover." Average Joe felt a wave of relief wash over him. He had been so quick to judge Corbin, and he felt guilty for not giving him the benefit of the doubt. "I'm sorry, too," Average Joe said, shaking Corbin's hand. "I should have trusted you." "It's okay," Corbin said, smiling. "I understand why you were suspicious." As they talked, Average Joe couldn't help but feel a sense of awe. He had always wanted to make a difference in the world, and here was Corbin actually doing it. He felt humbled by Corbin's bravery and dedication, and he knew that he had a lot to learn from him. As Corbin left, Average Joe felt a renewed sense of hope. He knew that there were good people in the world, people who were willing to put themselves on the line to make a difference. He felt proud to be a part of that community, and he knew that he would never take it for granted again. In the end, the Smithsons were caught and brought to justice. The community came together to support the victims, and there was a sense of healing and closure. Average Joe knew that he would never forget what had happened, but he also knew that he would never let it define him. As he sat on his porch watching the sun set over the horizon, he felt a sense of peace. He had been through a lot, but he had come out the other side stronger and wiser. He knew that there would always be challenges in life, but he also knew that he had the strength and resilience to overcome them. Hey there, everyone. As we come to the end of this spine-tingling barbecue horror story, I just wanted to take a moment to thank each and every one of you for tuning in and listening to my tale. Your support and attention mean a lot to me, and I'm glad that I could share this story with all of you. I hope it left you feeling a bit scared and on edge, but also entertained and engaged. I also want to remind you all to be careful and aware of your surroundings, even in places that you might consider safe and familiar. You never know what could be lurking just around the corner. Thanks again for listening, and I hope you'll join me for more spooky stories in the future. Your host, Average Joe.